I specialize in working with individuals and couples to really step in and embrace who they are, um, be empowered about their choices, being able to advocate for themselves, be able to set boundaries, be able to share their needs, their wants, their desires, their fantasies in a way that honors who they are, but is also respectful and honors, who they're talking to. Now, in my private practice, that's really focused on sex and sexuality. In my speaking business, it's more around conscious communication. So what is the language? How do we communicate with ourselves, that little voice in our head? And then how can we be responsible for that when we're talking to other people? And usually, the clients that I work with on the speaking side are on the corporate side. So how do we deal with conflict? How do we deal with changes in the workplace? How do we deal with any kind of upset or termination? How do we handle that powerfully and be able to move through that? So that's on the corporate side, but also in my private practice, it's working one-on-one with individuals or one-on-two with couples.
I love what you said because to me, it sounds like a lot of what you do is helping people be aware of how they're feeling, who they are, and taking ownership of that.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've been doing these interviews, one of the things that I've really noticed is that when it comes to sexuality, many people don't even know themselves because
Mm-hmm.
overall, we are not really encouraged to explore this aspect of who we are.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. In so many areas of our life, with our careers, we evolve, with our bodies and how we take care of that, our nutrition, our exercise, we're always like, hey, this is something that we want to do. Our passions, our curiosities, or maybe our hobbies. It's like, oh yeah, this is really great. But sex is this thing that's supposed to be, kept in this like box. And if we fit in the box, that's okay. This is acceptable. This is the right way to do it. This is the right person to do it with. This is the right relationship to have to be able to do that with. And this is what sex is supposed to look like. But in my experience over the last 12 years, working with clients, it's like very few people fit in that box. But it takes something to have the courage to own that for yourself and be like, hey, I don't fit in this box and it's okay. And I'm still deserving of great relationship, of love, of great sex, even though I don't fit in this box.
I think it's no secret that one of our biggest needs as a human being is to belong. And so
Mm,
I think that's part of the reason why when people realize that they don't fit in the box that
mm,
everyone who they want to belong with says is what's right and appropriate or whatever the case is, there's fear of being cast out from the group because
yeah.
we do cast people out of the group all the time culturally.
Yeah, absolutely. I think our greatest need is to be loved and to be accepted, and our greatest fear is to be judged and made wrong. And I think so many people walk through the world with that. And for some people, it's conscious, and for a lot of people, it's subconscious, right? It's that script that they're running in their head of who they're supposed to be, or how they're supposed to show up, or how they're supposed to love, or even how they're supposed to dress. And I think there's three things that I've come to understand, Ty, for people. And this is working with clients, this is speaking, this is people in my life, my friends, my family, my lovers, my partners, is people want to know that they're seen, so their experiences are valid, that they are heard, so what they're saying is landing with the person that they're talking to, and that they matter. So that they're seen, that they're heard, and that they matter. And if you can do that in any kind of connection or any kind of relationship, that lays the foundation for whatever kind of relationship that you want to build. And if you're in conflict with that person, if you can honor those three things, that tends to de-escalate that conflict as well.
What are your thoughts on people who have realized that their preferences or who they are doesn't fit into the stereotypical box
Mm-hmm.
that society deems as acceptable? They've recognized this in themselves. What's kind of the first steps in reconciling that aspect of themselves and the aspect of themselves that wants to belong and doesn't want to be cast out?
Yeah, I think the first part is if we work internally and then externally. So if we first start with, ourselves and realizing, and this is specifically in the spectrum of sex and sexuality, the word that comes up that I think is the most damaging word is the word normal. Because there's this expectation, or we're supposed to be normal, and within sex and the spectrum of it, there is no normal. What there is statistically normative. So there's a bell curve, right? So the vast majority of people fit inside this bell curve, but there's those people that are on the edges of it, right, at the very, very beginning or the very, very end of it, and those people don't fit into what that is. So part of it is realizing that there is no normal. So anyone judging you because of who they think you should be, anyone blaming you or making you wrong for who you are, that for me is a red flag that person is probably not a good match for having them in your life. Now, for some people, that could be your partner. For some people, that could be friends. And in really difficult situations, sometimes that's family members. But the first part is owning who you are and stepping into your truth. Because when you own who you are, it's a lot easier to deal with the external, right? Because people are judgment-making machines. They're going to judge you, how you dress, what your body looks like, how you identify, your orientation, how you like to have sex. That's what people do. But when you can do the work to really honor yourself and know that who you are and how you express yourself as a sexual human being is just as important as anybody else, even, just as important those people that fit in the bell curve, that's the first step. The second step, I would say, is finding community. So, I did this, I looked at some numbers and I crunched the numbers right now about, there's 8 million people on the planet. Let's just say that right now. And if only 1% of the planet is into the same things that you are into, if you're in that vast, minority, there's still, again, forgive my math, I'm not sure what but like 800 million people or something like that are into the same thing that you're into on this planet. So I think finding the people that enjoy the same things that you do, that are into the same things that you're into, is key. And I think online opens those things up to a whole new way that wasn't available when I was growing up, certainly. But also, it's not just about, I think when people think about sex or kink or things that are not statistically normative, they hyper-focus on the actual physical activity of it. And they're like, oh my God. And they're like, oh, I got to find people who are into, I don't know, wearing a pirate's hat and getting flogged with a riding crop. Like that's their thing. And they get really focused on, I got to find people who, wear that hat and have riding crops. That's part of it. The other part of it is finding those people, but also finding people that it's not just about the hat and the riding crop and enjoying that, but are these people really good people? What is their communication? What is the foundation that maybe exploring that specific thing that you like is there? And for me, that really boils down to finding people where communication, consent, trust, vulnerability, self-awareness, introspection, all those other kind of things are really vital, because then it's like, oh, that's a good person and I'm a good person. And then we also like this thing that's there. Hey, we can talk about that. We may build a relationship. We may be able to explore that with one another. So I think there's levels. The first is beginning with yourself, developing, doing that work, working with a therapist, reading lots of books, stepping in and owning your truth. And then being able to find that community of those people who are into the same things that you are, and making sure they're great people. And, we could be talking about people who like pickleball, right? There's cool people who play pickleball, and there's, not so nice people that play pickleball. You want to hang out with your people. Find the people that have the same values that you have, as well as the same kinks, fetishes, curiosities, and lovely ways that you like to express yourself sexually.
When people aren't able to have these experiences that are true to themselves, does it affect other parts of their life?
Yeah. When you fight yourself, you always lose. Right? Because it's like, the person that's saying, hey, yes, 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 on one side of your shoulder, and the other shoulder, someone's saying, no, 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 no. Someone is going to win, someone is going to lose, but it's still your shoulder. And so, I try and bring that to people, to have them look at as a step of humility and a step of acceptance for who they are, and what makes them unique, what makes them special, what makes them amazing, is being able to embrace that piece and able to just own that. Because, spending that time, and I, work with lots of clients that make themselves wrong, that are constantly battling themselves and shaming themselves and going through the cycle that's been there for years, if not decades. And being able to set that down and be able to work through that and learn to love and learn to accept yourself is that key thing. And to go back to the three things that I said before, is being seen, being heard, and know that you matter. Sometimes that starts within. Like, it's beautiful when someone else can do that, but it's about you stepping up and being like, hey, like, I need to be seen. Like, this is who I am. I need to be heard. This is what I'm sharing about myself, about what works, what doesn't, consent, but, boundaries, exploring new things, whatever it is, and that I matter. So that, people know, and this is another thing I say, you train people how to treat you, right? So that you matter. People know that you matter. People then know, hey, I'm going to respect this person because they said something, and they keep their boundaries and they hold their boundaries. So there's, so much in that about, embracing who you are. And, because if you don't, and, it'll come out other ways. If you try and suppress something that's really authentically who you are, it'll come out other ways. And often those ways aren't the most productive or healthiest. You may be sneaking around, you may be, trying to self-medicate with drugs or alcohol to avoid that. There's so many different, overeating, emotionally, all that other kind of stuff, because we don't think we're deserving, or we don't think we're good enough, or we don't think we're okay. And, you are, and you are deserving, and stepping in to that place and loving yourself and knowing that you matter, and what you say and who you are is deserving of that love and acceptance that we all want.
Beautiful. I'm curious, what drew you to this profession?
Ooh, Lordy Ty. So there's a couple incidences when I was growing up, when I was younger. So I grew up Catholic. And I was an altar boy for 7.5 years. Great experience. And so I saw the power of someone speaking in front of an audience, and that really propelled me to my speaking career now. But I also, at a very young age, was struck with the hypocrisy around sex and sexuality, and loving people and accepting people. And it was like no sex until marriage, so premarital sex only. But it's not that even having sex is bad. Thinking about having sex is just as bad. So I'd go to church and I'd be like, okay, great, I'm not going to think. And then I'd walk outside and there's billboards and advertisements and like magazines and TV ads, and it's like sex, 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 sex coming at me all the time. And I was like, what is happening? How? And so from a very young age, I saw that there was extreme power in how sex was discussed, in how sex was good in some areas and bad in some areas. So that really, got me thinking. The second incident is when I was in grade 9. So I grew up, back in Vancouver, British Columbia. And so I was in high school, and I found out that a young girl that I played with growing up like outside in the neighborhood. Your parents like, go outside, come in when the lights turn off. That's, when I grew up, before any kind of electronics. And so I grew up playing with her in the neighborhood. We'd have tons of fun. And I found out that she had been sexually abused from the age of like 7 to 13. And I remember finding that out, and I remember it hitting me when I found that out, and I ended up leaving school because I was so upset, and went home, walked home, lived relatively close, and I came home and I was crying, and my mom was there. My mom's an amazing woman, and she said, "Stephen, what's going on?" And I told her, and she said, "Stephen, it wasn't your fault," because I was 2 years younger than this woman, a 7-year-old telling a 5-year-old what's going on. Like, don't have the cognitive capacity to do anything about that. Anyways, she came over later, and we sat down and we talked, and what I was left with, Ty, was like, this shouldn't happen on my watch. Like, this is not okay, and what can I do to prevent this from happening? And the third thing that happened in my earlier years is, and my parents are going to love this one. I was a topless male waiter at a place called the Wild Coyote. And so what we would do between 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock, it was women only and male strippers. Now, the strippers in Vancouver at that time, you could go full Monty. And then at 8 o'clock, men could come in, couples come in, and turn into like a regular nightclub. So why that was so fascinating for me, because it's my last year of university, I'm 20, I don't know, 21, 22, 23, I can't remember, is there's like 300 women, like cheering, shouting, like, and it was the first time, Ty, that I had ever seen like overt, like sexual interest expressed by a woman. Because, walking and growing up in North Vancouver and going to school and all that other kind of stuff, women, there's no access, and it wasn't okay for women to verbalize, to share their desire, to be excited about sex. And I'm sitting there, I was like, and again, this is far before I was sexual. I think I had my first girlfriend maybe at that time, but that was it. And I remember being like, whoa, like, Toto, we ain't in Kansas anymore. Like, the power of women owning their sexuality like knocked me back. And I was like, holy smokes. Like, I've been living, this is before I did any of my studies or school or education and master's, doctorate, blah, 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 blah. So I was just like, whoa, this is really powerful. So that was the thing that spurred my curiosity, from the growing up Catholic to that experience with my childhood friend, to then, my experience at the Wild Coyote, were the three things kind of spurred me on. And then, I've had my transformative, experiences in my own sex life as well, that have, continued to propel me to do what I do and help people really learn to love themselves and love others, regardless of, what they like to do sexually.
I'm so happy I asked you that question. I really am. Yeah. It's really interesting. And I think people can relate to each point in different ways. Many people can relate to that religious point of there being this dichotomy, especially because so many religions are very much abstinent and puritanical based, and but still your sexual nature is a part of you, and you feel it in in many cases in your childhood, and certainly your teen years. And then also you also brought in the potential trauma component, where you heard from a friend this trauma and maybe created some deep feelings in you as well. And many people can relate there. And then that final point of just experiencing that feminine, wild sexual energy coming at you, which it's like, I mean, yeah, if anyone who's had the pleasure of experiencing that, it's like, yes, it's a powerful force,
Yeah.
That's really, those examples were just really potent, and I'm so glad I asked. So thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Actually, so for a while, Jasmine brought on experts to be on the platform and to create their own content. And I know that you were one of the experts who did that. I have to
Mhm.
ask about your experience, and you can give it to me, your full experience. What was it like? Talk to me.
It was a ton of fun. I got to work with people. This was in the height of COVID. I got to work with people from all over the world. I got freedom and permission to like be myself. Um, so Vanessa was my direct, contact or handler, and she would just being like, Stephen, she's like, be more yourself. And I was like, what? She's like, just be more you. She's like, you have this thing, you have this energy. And it was the first time because it was like up until that point, it was like, oh, I had to be like Dr. Stephen DeWitt. And, I have more letters after my name than before my name. And, my doctorate, and I've written a book, and I'm like this guy. So you should listen to me because I'm smart, because I've spent, decades of my life focusing on this, because I've worked with so many people. I've worked in clinical blah, 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 blah. And what I learned from working with the folks at Jasmin was the power of just leaning in and being myself and having fun. So I'd go live twice a week. I'd post pictures, I'd write notes, I'd post videos. And I can get very creative. And again, this is the height of COVID. So there wasn't me beyond being on big stages and performing or anything else like that. So for me, it was this really fun like outlet for like me to be myself. And so, I mean, I would wear lots of costumes, I'd have fun. And it's like, there wasn't anything sexual or explicit in what I was doing. Actually, that was part of the contract. It was like, hey, I'm here as an expert. But, I'd be able to talk on such a range of topics that I was passionate about. I'd have to send it to Vanessa and she'd give me the green light and be like, yeah, that stuff's really, really okay and really fun. But it was where I really got to be myself. I could talk about anything that I was interested in, to you know the most kind of like heady, philosophical, cerebral, academic things of sex, to like fisting 101. How do we do it? Like, what are those questions? And I just found a real like place to play, and have a lot of fun while being myself. And it was a big boost, number one, to my confidence, but also to that place of like, hey man, you could just be yourself and have fun and allow your personality, allow your quirks, allow your uniqueness to shine. And it was a definite highlight of my career. And the team that I got to work with was top notch, and some of them I'm still in contact with to this day. So it was and yeah, just a lot of learning, like of the technology behind what it is to show up on a platform like Jasmin, and just yeah, kind of learning and figuring it out and having fun along the way.
Your answer, I just brought so much joy to even me hearing about your
It
experience.
was it was awesome. It was like, if I don't know if where those videos are or where that content is, but it was, yeah, it was a lot of fun.
I mean, I've seen it. I have seen it in the past, so I know that it exists somewhere.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah,
it was good for sure.
I really love that though, that one of the things you said is that, you were given this permission through the platform to really be yourself.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you because it's so true. I was chuckling when you said, I have more letters after my name than in my name, because there are a lot of people, especially in this field, that truly do. And I think, unfortunately, really rely on that for their to be their value, when you could have all the degrees and letters and everything from the most prestigious schools, but if you're not helping people to get better, what does it mean?
I think it empowered me more. It like people, I went to the dentist, got my teeth cleaned last week, right? So I come in and they're like, oh, would you like to be referred to as Dr. DeWitt? And I'm like, no. I'm like, no, 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 no. And I'm like, I use Dr. DeWitt if I'm like, negotiating some contract or getting a new credit card or something like that. But other than that, like even on my name here, it's Stephen DeWitt. I want to be able to break down any barriers that potentially, so somebody's like, oh, doctor, he's smart, he did a lot of school, he's educated and I'm not, or he knows more than me, and so that puts a barrier there. I'm all about removing all those barriers. One of the things that I really believe in, and I tell people, and it kind of sets them aback, because I'll work with clients and I tell them, I'm like, you're the expert, and they're like, what? Well, that's why I'm coming to you, Stephen. What are you talking about? And I'm like, you're the expert in your own sex life. I haven't lived your life. I haven't walked that mile in your shoes. I haven't experienced all the experiences that have created this amazing, unique human being that I'm speaking to right now. You're the expert. What I can do is create a safe space for you to be able to share that. And what I can do is I can listen for what's missing. Right? Not that there's anything wrong or bad, but it's like, if it was there, it would actually make a difference in your life. Or if there's something that we can like take out that actually isn't serving you, how can we do that? And what can we do for you to move forward in that place? So for me, it's, always going back to that place with people so they can really learn for themselves and grow that way.
I'm curious what your thoughts are on how sex tech, AI, online communities are playing their role in human sexuality. I know it's a complicated dance,
Ooh,
but I'm
we do a
curious.
whole other episode on this one, Ty. So let's talk about, because I think there's different ways and lenses that we can look at it. I think number one, it's opened up people's eyes and minds to communities, spaces, and activities that they thought they were alone in, or that they should feel bad about, or they should feel shame in. And so I think there's a lot of positive in being able to see your interests or your desires or your fantasies being shared by other people. Again, that goes to our fundamental human desire and need to belong. So I think that's powerful. I think we always need to be careful in online spaces because of the anonymity that can be there. So there can be, people who are not nice, people who will say hurtful things, people who will manipulate or, just be not nice human beings. And I think when we start looking at sex, which for so many people is a very private, confidential, intimate, personal part of who they are, and it's really vulnerable to share that with other people. Also with, people have experienced different kinds of trauma, and then we put it out, then we're like on these online forums or online places. Again, it goes back to like, hey, are the people that we're connecting with really solid people, really good people? Do they share the same values that I have? Because there's a piece of where, again, we can get really focused on, you meet someone online and this is the type of sex and you're both into, and it's like super hot and you're, excited and you're hard, you're wet, you're hard, you're hard, you're wet, you're wet, however you get excited. And we can focus on that. And sometimes it's really important to like hit pause on that and start talking about so this is what I often have. So people are really clear what their fantasies about or how they want to connect with someone. And the question that I ask them is, what is necessary for you to feel safe, for you to feel respected, for you to know that you matter, that is the foundation that this experience happens, right? Because I think so many people get focused on like the sex part and like maybe the mechanics or the physics of the sex, the hydraulics of hard into wet, if you will. That works, but that person isn't respectful, or you're not respectful, or you're not on the same page, or you're not communicating the same way, can be challenging. Also, I think, people who are involved in any kind of sex work, or any kind of camming, I think that having that self-awareness of what that takes and the type of, like, whenever I do a interview or work with anybody, even with like Jasmin, I said, well, what makes someone really successful here? Or what are you looking for? Or what type of personality really works for you here? Because as in any job, you're going to have people who excel, who do really well. And to be able to like know about, hey, what are the challenges of this job, or how do I need to manage my self-care, or what are my boundaries around this, or am I a good match for this? So I think those are kind of the off the top of my head thoughts on sex and online space and different avenues that we can connect sexually. Is they're amazing for what they are, and always be checking in with yourself and making sure you're being honored in the whole process of exploring and sharing and connecting with people. That's so important, and sometimes we can forget about that or get caught up in the hotness of it. But for me, I'm committed that all people have a great sex life and they have relationships that work. And so thinking of some of those deeper questions can often, make a difference to the type of sex that they have. If it's, things that make you go, I want more, or, maybe I shouldn't have done that. I always say great sex happens the next day. People are like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, great sex happens the next day is, you have an experience one day, and the day after you're like, oh my God, I want more of that. Your head's going, you're fantasizing about that. You're like, holy F, when can we do that again? Right? That's great sex. Now, I think a lot of us, myself included, the next day we're like, oh geez, that wasn't good. Why did I do that? That wasn't the smartest thing for me to do. Why did I say yes when I meant to say no? Why does I say no when I meant to say yes? And you get caught in that. And so, that's something I always leave with people to think about is, again, what are the things that we can do setting up ahead of time, and what are the foundation that we can build on so we can actually have that great sex in our lives?
I love the point you just touched on, because what it is, in my opinion, is making sure that the things you're doing are connected and not just acts. And I want to talk about that. What role does connection play in our intimacy?
I always say, have sex for the right reasons, and only you know what those right reasons are. So I like to be expansive in how I approach sex and how I talk about sex, because we look at one night stands or just getting off or interacting online, whatever that is. If it works for you and it honors you, I think that's so important. I always say, we're always in relationship. I'm in relationship. You and I have a relationship right now, right? We're interacting, you're interviewing me, I'm sharing my expertise, my wisdom. A one-night stand, you're in relationship with another human being. You're interacting online with someone sexually. There's a level of relatedness that's there. And I think there's, an important type of distinction and co-creating it with that person of what it is that you're doing. And saying the things that sometimes you may be in your head about. Some of those things are like, hey, should I share with this person? Should I have the safer sex conversation with this person? Hey, should I share what turns me on? What gets me off? hey, should I share with this person my boundaries? Hey, should I share with this person, my history or any kind of triggers that are there for me that I want to avoid? Like, the more, in my experience, the more conversations that you can have ahead of time, the better. Now, that flies in the face of this very romanticized view of kind of like the Disney fairy tale kind of thing of like, oh, I'm going to find, and we're supposed to have amazing sex because we love each other, or because we're married, or because fill in whatever blank that's there. And I always say that great sex is something that's co-created. Why? Because we all have a unique sexual fingerprint. So I could be like, there's Ty. She's a beautiful woman. I'm attracted to her. And hypothetically, you find me attractive and you're attracted to men. And it's like, great. We're like sexting. We're like talking about stuff. And then we get together and we have sex and it's not good. It's not good. We haven't talked about, hey, what is it that we're looking for out of this? What are our safe words? What does aftercare look like? What actually turns you on? What do you enjoy doing? What are your boundaries? All those things are, for me, again, that foundation that we can stand on. And if any of those things don't work, I always encourage people, but this is also something for myself. I'm like, hey, Ty, like, thanks so much. I think we're looking for different things. Best of luck to you. And not being attached. I always like to come from a place of sexual abundance and sexual wealth than sexual scarcity of like, oh my God, Ty is so hot. And I really love long brown hair. I'm now going to say all the right things, do all the right things, right? We try and when we come from that place of scarcity, we get in this world of like, in order to have this person like me, in order to have this person have sex with me, I now have to fit myself again into this box that would then have Ty be like, okay, yeah, Stephen, I think we're going to have sex. And then it doesn't work. I think it's so important to have that connection first and foremost with yourself and to be like, hey, this is what I'm into. This is what I like. This is what I need. These are my safe words. These are my triggers. This is what aftercare looks like. This is what my boundaries are. This is how I'm feeling today. And have sex meet you where you're at. Rather than a lot of people are like, oh, I want to meet, I got to be this thing. So if I want to have sex with Ty, I got to be this guy. I got to have whatever, six-pack abs, or I have to have this type of penis, or I have to be into this type of sex, or I'm looking for a girlfriend that I want to settle down with, right? Because that's, again, this narrative or this script that I have to have. And for me, I always encourage people to rewrite that script. Like, look really carefully at that script and figure out what honors you. Because so many people, in my experience, follow the script, follow the narrative. And again, in a heteronormative space of like, hey, dating, and then get on this relationship escalator and we keep going up, and then like we're married, and then like 5 years later, you look over and look at me and be like, why am I with this guy? Right? But we did all the right things. We followed that script, and the divorce rate is, I don't know, 50%, somewhere around there, depending on the studies. And there's a comedian, I can't remember what the comedian says. He's like, and those are the people who are courageous enough to leave the relationship. Because we all know people who, have been like, hey, marriage is the thing, or I have to follow this way. And it's not healthy. It's not good for them. So I think that's where, again, it's really important for people to look at, hey, what does connection look like for the type of sex or the type of relationship that I want to have? And I always err on the more communication, the better. And sometimes people think, again, that it's not romantic or it's not sexy enough. I find in my experience that when people know that you actually are interested in them and care about them, not because you want to, again, get married or get that relationship escalator, they're far more open to share. They feel, again, far more respected, far more safe, very, you can build trust in those ways. And then the sex that you can have is unreal. And again, I'm speaking part of my journey. When I shifted from a this heteronormative where I'd be like the sexual pursuer, and then the woman would be like, oh, not me, like I'm saving myself for marriage or whatever, and being like, no, that's gross, let's throw that out. Like, I'm attracted to you, are you attracted to me? Yes, okay, cool. What do we want to create, and how can you feel comfortable, and how can I feel comfortable with each other? Because then once you have that foundation, you're able to explore so many things that are now, my mom would always say, two heads are better than one. So rather me being the man being like, well, this is what I like and this is what I want. And again, going back to what I said about being in that room, as a topless male waiter for ladies night, and being like, oh yeah, women, like if I can, and again, this is my personal story, give women a space or a platform to actually share what they want, and then two heads come together rather than one. And what I was able to create personally was mind-boggling. And that was part of the reason why I was like, hey, if I can share this with other people and empower them, not that it has to look anything like my sex life, but empower them to own who they are, to share what they like, to build that foundation, and then be able to get really creative with sex. It's like a sexual playground, and your imagination is the only limit. And that's what, clients love, and why I do what I do.
I love the examples you gave of people who will just sometimes say what they think the other person wants, or maybe what the other person has said they want. But then what happens is they're giving from a place that's inauthentic to who they are potentially. And you're right. When two people come together and one or both of them are not being authentic, it's not going to make great, incredible sex, because great, incredible sex is from that authentic place of like, I'm really having my need here met. You're having your need there met, which is also this great symbiotic relationship, right? It's interesting. I also loved your point about the more you communicate, the better your chances are of having this really incredible experience. That is something that when I interview members that are like, yeah, I've been seeing the same model for 15 years, 20 years, I'm telling you, I think that it is because all they can do is communicate. And in order for them to get what they're wanting and have their needs met in this experience they're paying for, they have to be very explicit with their communication and what their needs and wants are. And models that I've interviewed, they're very explicit too with what they're okay with and not. So then when both people come from this authentic place, it actually builds this deep connection that I don't see in many normal relationships where someone is confused. Yeah.
Well, I think so. I would agree with you, and that could be, talking to models, a camming site, Jasmin, that world of things. But I also, that can be anywhere.
Yes.
And where we go, often is falling into that trap of the expectations that either we put on ourselves or we think other people are putting on us. And that could be like people getting married and they're not honest with each other about what their needs are and what, and the explicitness is. And when you do have that, there's such a deeper understanding of that human being that you're connecting with, that it doesn't surprise me that, there's people, who have had these relationships and seeing the same models for 15, 20 years, because there is that need. And because, sometimes it's, and I work with clients that have challenges creating that with other human beings for X amount of different things in their life and dating and getting into that world. So I think there's something really powerful about shedding what I call the sins, the standards, ideals, norms, and expectations of that society has put on us and that we have really put on ourselves of who we're supposed to be. And when we can celebrate that uniqueness and share that and take a risk, share with people who you are, you're deserving of feeling, you're deserving of connection, you're deserving of love, you're deserving of great sex. And because you have again, non-statistically normative way of expressing yourself sexually doesn't mean that you're not deserving of all those things in life, because that's what makes us human, is relationships, and in being in relationship with other people. And I'm on a journey personally to always look at how I can up level that, and then how I can support other people to up level that. And those relationships, again, can be for the most intimate and sexual of nature to, the most professional corporate side of things. I think there's a lot of room for us to grow, and a lot of room for us to realize that we are more alike than we realize. And especially in today's climate where there's such divisiveness and tribalism and challenges on ideology, I think we're at an interesting place where my hope is, and what I'm really pushing for, is that the pendulum to swing the other way, where we realize that we are more alike than we ever knew, and the things that we struggle with make us human, and the things that we struggle with are the access to connection and the love that we all want.
I mean, that was so beautifully said. Like I usually ask around two other questions, but I feel like I have to end on that beautiful note. It's just beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for sharing yourself, and having me on today. It was a pleasure.